Today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook with a 30-day trial today by signing up at audible.com/infographics or text infographics to 500-500 to get started. It's been a while since we pitted an average person against a well-known figure. In this comparison series, we've included a US president in Donald Trump, a divisive character if ever there was one. We looked at Mr. William Gates, the universally liked nerd that revolutionized the computer industry. We've even had the young YouTube celeb Jake Paul in the series, which wasn't to many of our viewers' liking. But today, we have a person painted as both a villain and a hero depending on where you stand. In America, he's often portrayed as the big bad wolf at the door. But then American filmmaker Oliver Stone turned heads when he showed Mr. Putin to be what seemed like a reasonable and intelligent man. Today, we'll look closely at Vladimir and see how he fares against his people in this episode of the Infographics Show, Vladimir Putin versus Average Russian. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born on the 7th of October, 1952. That makes him a Libra, whose sign is the scales. Maybe not a bad sign if you want to go into politics. It also makes him 65 years old. The median age in Russia is 39, from a population of almost 144 million. According to data published by the Moscow Times, the life expectancy for both men and women in Russia is 71.87 years. But for women, it's 77.06, and only 66.5 for men. Most research regarding men leaving the planet young in Russia points to hard times economically, and also the fact that many Russian men take part in risky behaviors, such as heavy drinking and incessant smoking. So Putin, looking fit and like he has many years ahead of him, could stand at 65 to not be average in terms of health and how long he will last. We might add to this that a few years ago, the World Health Organization wrote, Russia has the biggest percentage of adult smokers among the 14 countries surveyed by the World Health Organization. The survey found that 60% of Russian men smoked and around 22% of Russian women were smokers. According to some media articles in 2017, Putin loathes the habit and wants to see the end of it in Russia. So again, he goes against the norm. He doesn't drink alcohol either, unless it's some part of political protocol. The Moscow Times actually wrote a piece in 2014 titled, "Vodka is Putin's worst enemy." He's an avid swimmer, a gym addict, and he detests the booze. Russia is said to be the fourth largest alcohol consumer per capita in the world, which makes Vladimir stand out from the average person. Now, let's have a look at his body. Depending on what site you look at, Putin is either 5 feet 6 inches, or 168 centimeters, or 5 feet 7 inches, or 170 centimeters. The Guardian, a fairly trustworthy news source, actually published an article on world leader heights. It turns out many leaders are quite short. Can we invoke little man complex here? Well, we shouldn't get into that. Anyhow, it seems Putin is 5 foot 7 inches. A global height survey tells us that the average male height in Russia is 5 feet 10 inches, or 177.2 centimeters, and for women, 5 feet 4.5 inches, or 164.1 centimeters. So Putin again is not average. He has brown hair and blue eyes. Now we can find Russians in forums talking about what is the most common eye and hair color, and most say brown, with blonde being not as common. They also say black hair is most common the more east you go. Another site we found said that 47% of Russians have this light brown hair and 29% are blonde. The rest we assume have black hair. This site also said that light brown eyes are the most common, closely followed by blue eyes. So in this regard, we can say Putin is at least average. From the scant information about Putin's education, we can find that he excelled in sports and was at a young age a black belt in judo. He was also fluent in German before he graduated high school. It said Putin also speaks English very well, although it's not his chosen language when interviewed. Some data we found, admittedly from 2015, said about 30% of Russians are able to speak English. That is a big change, as it was only 16% in 2003. The next most spoken language is German. We might say Putin is ahead of the pack in this regard. As for education, Russia has one of the highest literacy rates in the world, 99.7% for men and 99.6% for women. And also one of the highest rates of people completing tertiary education, meaning education after high school, at 54%. Vladimir was one of those people that graduated college, although he studied law. We are told right now in Russia, 1 in 10 college graduates major in education. 22% of Russian college graduates studied in the field of engineering. Putin got involved with the KGB, working undercover in Germany for a while under the communist regime of the Soviet Union. Nonetheless, when communism took its last breath, Putin admitted that it was a grand plan that was doomed to fail. In 1999, he called communism a blind alley, far away from the mainstream of civilization. He might go against the grain here. In 2013, Russia's Public Opinion Foundation surveyed a large group of Russian people of all ages, and it turned out that 2/3 of the participants saw communism as a good thing. Only 7% said that the word communism was related to something negative. You might think that this was mainly the older generation that favored communism. But even within the young generation, 50% of respondents still like the idea of communism. In Putin's generation, 69% of people approved of communism. This again makes him not average. As for work, he is of course employed. Russia's unemployment rate is 5.2%. He also works in the biggest sector, which is services, that accounts for about 66% of Russian jobs. About 27% of Russians work in the industry sector and the rest in agriculture. Over to religion, Putin was baptized into the Christian Orthodox Church. Is he still religious? It seems so, as it's reported God still appears in his speeches, and he is not against religion being taught in schools. It's also said that he often surrounds himself with people of the Christian faith, but when interviewed by Time in 2007 and asked if he believed in God, he was vague. There are things I believe, which should not, in my position at least, be shared with the public at large for everybody's consumption, because that would look like self-advertising or a political striptease, was his clever answer. If Putin is still Russian Orthodox, then he joins 41% of the Russian population, making him quite average. There is a chance, being such a rational man, he could be atheist, which at 13% of Russians is the second largest group apropos religious beliefs. We very much doubt that he is Muslim, Buddhist, or pagan. Statistics also tell us 25% of Russians are spiritual but not religious, which according to his Times interview, could also be Mr. Putin's cup of tea. So now to the money, something quite often discussed when Putin is brought up in conversation. How much does he have? Well, in 2017, Fortune magazine published an article, and this was the title: Vladimir Putin is reportedly richer than Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos combined. According to the story, which admittedly is biased on the research of one man, Putin made savvy investments and used his political clout to secure very profitable enterprises. We even did a show on this not so long ago, which cited the same resource as the Fortune story. And if that is to be believed, Putin is worth $200 billion. If that's not the true figure, other estimates have put his wealth at $40 billion and $70 billion, stating that much of his wealth has come from investing in the oil and gas sectors. Whatever the case, the man who is said to own a $1 billion palace repale with all the trappings of the mega rich certainly isn't short of a buck or two. It's said that he has 20 palatial properties, 58 planes, and 4 yachts, not to mention what he might have hidden in some vault somewhere. Is this true though? Not surprisingly, it's mostly American media that concentrate their efforts on Putin's mass wealth. The Moscow Times has mentioned nothing about it, but did publish a survey in recent years that said Russians were most unhappy about the distribution of wealth in the country. In a separate article in 2018, the Moscow Times wrote that in his last 4-year term, Putin earned $310,500 and had only a modest house, a small bit of land, and a garage. It said he also owns 3 cars and a boat trailer, a far cry from a super yacht. Russia Today calls what some of the Western media say about Putin's secret wealth Western propaganda and demonizing. The Kremlin has called it pure fiction. But here at the Infographics show, we are not purveyors of truth. We are just trying to give you both sides of the story. Anyhow, the average monthly wage in Russia in April 2018, according to the Ministry for Economic Development Russia, was $702. Whatever Putin earns or has, we can safely say that he is not close to being average. If you want to learn more about the Russian leader, we suggest listening to an audiobook called The New Tsar: The Rise and Reign of Vladimir Putin by Stephen Lee Myers. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership, so you can check out this book risk-free. Listening is a better way to binge content you love while doing things you love. Another great thing about Audible is that you can switch seamlessly between devices, picking up exactly where you left off. Whether it's on your phone, through your car, from a tablet, or at home on an Amazon Echo, you can get through tons of books while doing almost anything. Plus, your books are yours to keep. With Audible, you can go back and re-listen anytime, even if you cancel your membership. Go to audible.com/infographics or text infographics to 500-500 to get started today. What do you think about this divisive man? Good, bad, or somewhere in the middle? A great leader or a corrupt crook? A threat to the West or an exaggerated foe? Tell us what you think in the comments. Also, be sure to watch our other video called Donald Trump versus Average American. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.